the best HLTV fantasy player we've had ever. It's Lucy.
Not quite the EF victory that I forecasted. I'm allowed to get it wrong sometimes, one or two a season. I think in hindsight, obviously, Vitality and Spirit were the two favorites to get to the grand final. And the problem was that I gambled on both sides of the bracket. In future, should just be gambling on one side, so at least I can recover a little bit, but unlucky. GG, we go next. PTL, CLUJ-NAPOCA. I'm very sorry, Romanians, if I've gotten that wrong. This is a really interesting event because it's first of all divided into two fantasies, so group and then playoffs. So this is just the groups, and it's a Swiss best of three. So it's like the major in that there's 3 games played that go straight through. So minimum 3 best of threes and up to 5 best of threes played by some of these teams, which is really important when you're considering your budget picks because you can't just put chicken out on a bronze and then forget about them. They're going to play at least 3 best of threes, so you need to be a little cleverer about how you're drafting some of the more budget players, but it does give you a lot of flexibility with your draft because you could technically go from 5 different teams here and it would be viable because 8 of these teams are going through, and some of the stronger players on the weaker teams can be really good here if they get through because they have a lot of opportunities to frag out across up to 5 games. Rather than going through all of the teams individually here, I'll go through the players like I normally do, and I'll talk about the teams as we go. Eternal Fire, you can't really go wrong. I think Magia is maybe one of the best players you can draft here for 190. Good rolls. He'll farm against Imperial. I love Imperial Valkyries, but I think Eternal Fire, of all the teams here, is the one that they're going to struggle the most against. So if you're picking an Imperial player, chicken out that first game. Xantares, Voxic, Vicaria, all good choices. I think Jota, maybe a little overrated for that price. I think if he was in the 190s, maybe, but I think the other 3, pretty reasonable. And I think my Magia Xantares is going to be incredibly common because it feels pretty decent. For FaZe, I think you're looking at Elige, you're looking at Frozen. I think Brokey is maybe a little too expensive considering he can be very inconsistent. So in my eyes, it's mostly Elige that I look to here. I think Rain actually could be maybe a little sleeper because they have to play a lot of games and he's normally a pretty consistent player. Also good rolls. The Mongols, I think the player that you want to avoid is Senzu, but the rest are good. Senzu, I didn't realize this, but he actually has injured his arm or his hand, and so he's just not performing at his peak at the moment. And so you're looking at Blitz, I think, as the best value player, but 910 has been the standout for them. I think Mazzinho is a little too expensive for his price. Mal's, we don't really know what's going on here. I'm not sold on the Brolin IGL project. We haven't seen them play with Spinks yet. I think it would be a mistake to draft them here for their pricing. Maybe after this event, they'll have more reasonable pricing that will suit what we expect from them at the moment. But yeah, very risky. VP, blacklisted on my channel. I don't draft them. If you wanted to, don't get Electronic, but maybe get Flamus, Icy, Fame Flip, I don't know. I don't want to draft them. That's it. Now I'm in the controversial camp. These two teams here, these are the most hated teams in Counter-Strike currently. If you go into the Global Offensive subreddit, I actually quite like these teams. Not necessarily the organizations, but I like the teams. I think this is about the best Danish roster you could get, except if you had Tesses, he's probably the only player that's missing here. But outside of that, I love it. Cadian as an IGL and as a leader. I think he's a real asset to Counter-Strike as a community, just as a showman. And I think that this team should be really good. They're just incredibly inconsistent. I cast them at the start of this week and it was a disaster. But in an event like this, they're probably not going to 3-0, but they're going to play, 4 or 5 games. I think Device could really come in clutch there. I think Stan's a little too expensive, but I think Device and Stare, both pretty good considering how this event plays out. Same story with Falcons. I think that this team is actually pretty exciting. I think the big problem for them is some consistency and it's raising that floor, but it's very new roster, right? And I think we're going to see a pretty good Falcons by the end of this season. Jisk has obviously been a big issue in terms of his consistency, but he's been playing a little bit better lately, which is good to see. And I think Tesses is one of the most underrated players out there at the moment. I love Tesses. I love his playstyle. I love that he's kind of like a jack of all trades. Really, really solid player. I think he'd be a really cool draft here. And Nico, obviously, it's Nico, world-class player. He's been playing well in a lot of the games for Falcons so far. And I think, again, when he's going to be playing 4, 5 best of 3s, that's a lot of points you could get from a player like Nico. I think Pain are also going to be a little underrated here, but I think the big problem is that the player you want to draft, which is Davideus, is a little too expensive. Like, you kind of just want to get a Liege at this point. But he could be, you know, a little clutch pick just because he won't be drafted because of his price. But yeah, I think Bigazera is the player that really stands out the most to me from Pain for 194. That feels quite good. New 3D Max with Body in the mix. Could be interesting. This team is always surprising, and I think that they have maybe like a 40% chance of getting through the groups here. I think Maka stands out as the best value. I think the rest, you can maybe look to other teams for better players for the same sort of price point. But again, could be some nice sleeper picks. MIBR and Big, I pretty much put in the same category where they're kind of on that borderline where they either finish like just scraping through in that 5th best of 3, or they surprise everyone and they go through. Insani could be very underrated because no one's really gonna be wanting to touch MIBR, and again, a lot of games that he'll be playing. Locality's good value. I think the big problem with Big is that the 2 players you want to draft, which are JDC and Hyped, are too expensive. Hyped has been playing great though. I've loved watching Hyped, so I think he's a really, really cool player. I don't know if he's 210 worthy, but again, if this team ends up playing a lot of best of 3s, that could really pay off for you. Wildcard and FlyQuest, these are also in very similar categories, I think, where they could scrape through, but are probably maybe 30% chance of getting through. I do think that their pricing is a bit more relative to what we expect them to perform at. I think Wildcard in particular have some really nice budget picks like Sonic, Fuzi, JBA, all really reasonable. In fact, I think Sonic and Fuzi, for those prices, you're not really breaking the bank, and it gives you a lot of budget to spend elsewhere. And for FlyQuest, it's Dexter, who can be that carry IGL at times. He's very cheap. And I guess Inns is obviously the player you want to draft, but do you want to spend 200,000? Hard to say, but I do hope they get through. I love the boys. I don't really rate this new complexity. Unfortunately, I don't think really anyone's buying into them just yet. Excited to see how they do. I like that it's, you know, a mostly US roster now. It's pretty cool. We'll see. Saw they've had to go through way too many changes, and I don't think they're going to be at the level that we saw from them last year for some time. And I just don't really see any players here that jump out for their price. Now, the thing with Imperial Valkyries, you know I love Imperial Girls. They're my team. I'll be watching every game. Even on Valentine's Day this Friday, I will be there with a glass of wine in hand watching this team. They have to play 3 best of 3s. All right, so you can't pick one and hide them away. If you do pick one, checking out the first game, Eternal Fire is gonna be the toughest opponent for them. And I think if you're going to draft anyone from this team, it's either Ana or it's 23. If Notori and Zaz are often the highest performers and can be, you know, big carries for this team, my concern is that those players are very aggressive riflers, and they're the ones that can get most affected by a poor performance, whereas Ana, very passive AWPer, good role activation and good boosters to be able to offset bad performances. And 23 also, again, more of a lurker style player, and I think doesn't necessarily have big drop-off games. So I think they're the 2 that are the best value to go into if you're wanting to get a player from this team. You just have to make sure that you use good role and boosters just to offset any possible negatives. But I do think they can surprise here. I think the big problem is that, you know, they're not going to have necessarily the knowledge of who they're going to be playing, so it's harder for them to kind of prep for some of these teams, and they don't get a lot of reps playing 2-on opposition. So the kind of prep that goes into their matches is a lot more important than it is for some of these other teams, because they have to have a lot more on the strategic side to be able to counter the play styles that they've not actually played in the server. But I do think with all 5 there, this team can surprise, and I can't wait to see what they do. I really, really hope they can get a win, and I'll be drafting one. You know I do. I have to. So let's draft. For my draft, because I am grabbing an Imperial player, I wanted to be able to then get a bunch of really strong players that could just carry me through. So I'm going to be going double Eternal Fire as the favorites to go through, plus obviously expecting good points from their first game. Not going to go Zentaris though. Going to go Maja and Woxic. Woxic's been in brilliant form this year and is 15k less, so it allows me to get some better players for the other 2. I'm going to grab a Liege. Again, I want aggro players that can farm. A Liege is an amazing player and I think has a good potential in an event like this to get a lot of points. I'm then going to be grabbing Nico. feel like I have to get Nico when he's going to be not picked at all here because he's basically Xantaro's price and he's going to be kind of in the shadow of both him and Elige. So I think Nico, huge potential for points here, and he's my sleeper pick. 155 left. I'm grabbing Anna. Kind of already made the case as to why I think Anna is the best choice, but also Romanian Goat. This is my team. I'm risking it again with this Imperial dip, but I do believe that the other players I've got here have so much potential that it's not going to cost me. So let me know what you think. Let me know what you're drafting. And as always, good luck.